they can focus on something more important, like maintaining or finding the jobs that they want, or their health, or anything that's really, really important to the basic quality of life that you have. And I don't understand why the argument of criminalizing it even exists. It just doesn't make any sense.
I hadn't spent a whole lot of time thinking about the reasons that people are homeless. I sort of instinctually thought we should support people who are housing insecure or homeless, and I never would have been in favor of criminalizing it, but I hadn't really thought about the issue much. But at this walk, the Sarah's Circle walk, afterward we came back and there was sort of a presentation, and they had several of the women who'd been served by Sarah's Circle got up and spoke, and then there was a video as well with, I think, about 4 women sort of telling their stories about how they became homeless, how they got to the point where they were using Sarah's Circle. And it was so eye-opening. I mean, first of all, just you need health care. You need health care in this country. I mean, that would solve so many of the reasons that people become homeless. But, just sort of thinking about how easy it would be, especially someone who doesn't have the safety net of, a large family that might be able to support them, how easy it would be for anybody to end up in this situation. And once you hear those stories, it's impossible to think that these are criminals, So one of the really great things about Sarah's Circle is that the alderman in their neighborhood is, comes to their events and is supportive of them. And I think if more politicians spent time hearing those stories and thinking about it in that way, that it would become very difficult for them to think about criminalizing homelessness. Sarah's Circle has on their website some of these videos, so I really recommend, if you have not spent time thinking about it, that you go and watch these videos on the Sarah's Circle website.
Thank you for that too, because people really don't stop and consider, like you said, why someone is homeless. And it really, not only medical problems, but, women experience homelessness for different reasons, domestic violence, divorce, disability. It's just, we can never assume why somebody might be experiencing homelessness. And I love the idea of having politicians get involved on a personal level. And then at the same time, also seeing the big picture, like you're saying, of lacking health care. It's just all ties together, definitely.
So in this recent tax bill that the GOP has proposed in Congress, there's a couple of things that really affect nonprofits. One of those things is that they're considering removing tax deductions for charitable donations. Some charities have been kind of worried about this. They've said that, that's going to result in fewer donations. Do you think that that's a bad thing, to remove that deduction?
So I think that a lot of people who make donations on sort of a small level don't think that much about the tax deduction. Like, I don't think about the tax deductions of my donations until I go to do my taxes. So, like, every time I get an email saying, you've made a donation to such and such, I filed an email folder called taxes, and then I go back through that at the end of the year and go, oh yeah, I made a donation to such and such. That's not why I'm making those donations. I would continue to support those charities. It's nice. I'm glad I get the tax deduction, but that's not why I do it. And in fact, there are plenty of organizations that I donate to who I cannot get tax deductions, political candidates, things like that. So, I think for the small level donations, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference. I think where it makes a difference is the really big donations. The people who are giving, they're going to will their estate, to a charity, or they're using charities as a way to lower their tax bill. I think those are the places where you might see a hit. And of course, for some charities, that's going to be really big because, that they can get a whole lot more money from, one person with $1 billion than they can from a lot of people like me. So I think it's going to be very some charities it's going to make a much bigger difference than others.
It's really interesting if you think about it, though, because in every other way, this tax bill has been really good for rich people.
Mm-hmm.
And eliminating this deduction would not be great for rich people and not be great for charities. So I'm not like 100% sure who this is supposed to be catering to.
Kelly, you took the words like exactly out of my mouth. I thought about small donations in the same way, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of like the kind of Bernie Sanders effect with people making lots of small donations, but it making a difference, but it not necessarily being for tax purposes or deductions. But so hopefully it won't be a deterrent to those people like us who, make a $25 or $50 donation here or there. I even like forget to save my confirmations and don't even do it on my taxes because it hardly makes a difference. But it's not going to stop me from doing it. So I hope there are other people like us who, if 100 people make a $25 donation, it's not a insubstantial amount, as we've seen with Mr. Sanders' campaign. It all adds up. So yeah, I'm worried about, of course, the chilling effect with the really big donors, and that's an actual, complication to consider. But man, we just got to keep trucking along. It's like it's a little bit here and there, little drops in the bucket, and taxes be damned.
I've actually never taken any deduction because I've always taken the standard deduction. We've never made enough money to itemize. We never had a mortgage, so
that's a good point. Yeah.
I would also like to plug. I mean, I agree 100% with everything. I wonder too sometimes how all of these different changes in the way that people get a deduction for donation will affect sort of more not financial donations but in-kind donations, because you can still get a break for doing that sort of thing in some instances. So like sometimes we'll get at the kitchen, we'll get bags and bags full of cheese, or meat that a restaurant donates, and they get to count that as a donation, but it's still something that they purchased and then donated. And so I wonder what the effects would be, and I hope that people would still continue to donate something that definitely has an expiration date, but it's troubling.
I actually didn't know that in-kind donations counted.
I'm not an expert. But I think if you purchase something and give it, that counts. Correct.
Sometimes I think the organization can write like a receipt based on what the estimated amount might be, and then you can use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think like all of those people who the day after the election last year all set up their recurring donations to Planned Parenthood and Southern Poverty Law Center, including me, I wasn't thinking like, what are the tax implications? I was thinking these are organizations that need my money right now.
Yeah.
And sure, it'll be great at the end of the year when I get to count them all, but that's not why I'm doing it.
No, and I think the same goes for any kind of volunteer hours. Like you don't get a tax deduction, Kelly, for all of the hats that you've knit.
I don't? Oh, man.
But you do, like the hours that you put in ultimately are what matters because you can see something immediate. And I think that's really important to think about too.
So the same tax bill is proposing repealing the Johnson Amendment. And if anybody doesn't know what the Johnson Amendment is, it prohibits nonprofits from engaging in certain types of political activity, like endorsing candidates, if they want to keep their tax-exempt status. So if they repeal the Johnson Amendment, that would leave nonprofits, including churches and other religious organizations, free to endorse candidates, participate in partisan politics, and still be tax exempt. I was interested to see that actually a lot of nonprofits oppose this. What do you think about repealing the Johnson Amendment?
I was interested to see that too. I mean, it's kind of heartening to know that they're quote unquote on our side. I don't know. I am against it. I mean, I'm against the repeal. To me, it's a little bit two-sided because it's pretty cut and dry with the separation of church and state. Like that's easy for me to work through. I don't think religion and politics should mix like that. I don't think religion should be partisan based. I'm not a religious person, but I can't imagine going to church and being preached at about politics. Like, don't people maybe go to church to get away from that, get above it? I don't know. But then on the other hand, what if there's an organization that I support who's supporting a political candidate whom I support? I don't want to be so simple-minded, but like that's almost okay to me. So I kind of struggled with this, you guys. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what other people think.
I struggled with it too, and I don't know that I would have as much until I started volunteering at this kitchen because it's attached to a church. And I too am not religious, but I have a lot of respect for this particular institution because it does so much good work for the community. But it's part of the Greater Chicago Food Depository, but it was started by the reverend of this church, and so it's very interconnected. And I see the work that it does, and I think, oh, this is really excellent. I wish there were more things like this. But then again, you're right. There's the other side of the coin where you think, yeah, the politics don't need to be here though. So I don't know what the right answer is either. I'm inclined to say definitely they shouldn't be mixed, and there should be a distinct separation about what can be a nonprofit status and what's not. But I can see where the complications definitely come in.
And I think also what kind of gets me is the kind of bigger issue of the tax exempt status and the benefits that organizations receive from that. I think the fear is if churches are going to support a particular candidate, then money can be donated to the churches and then to the candidates, and it can just get really wishy-washy and kind of scary to think about, churches being the new, super PACs. And that's something I think, need to be aware of and keep nonprofits as nonprofits and tax exempt and depoliticized. Because, like, I don't know, in a healthy society, like, we probably should strive to kind of keep those things separate. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
So I think one of the things that's tricky in this conversation is that however much churches are supposed to stay away from electioneering, they're not. It's pretty clear that there is at least a certain segment of sort of the Christian right that is just, overtly electioneering within the church. They're not even trying to hide it. They're not being subtle.
Do you mean, do they name candidates like by name and say like vote for this person or we support this person, or what's going on?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I
haven't been in one. So
I'm not an investigative journalist who's like sneaking into the churches and finding out. But that's my understanding, is that in some cases, yes, absolutely. But, even in ways that's more subtle than that. I mean, I've talked before on this about being raised Catholic, and, it's been the not quiet position of the Catholic Church for a very long time that abortion is wrong, and, it has become a wedge issue for voting, that sure, the church can't say you should vote for this candidate or this candidate. But, for a long time, priests were making it very clear in sermons that you should not vote for a candidate who supports abortion. And so it's a tricky fine line anyway. What counts as electioneering and what doesn't. And, so I think it's not quite as simple as saying, well, we have the law and so no one does it, and if we repeal the law, then everyone's going to do it. I think there's a lot going on already. I mean, you can't police every church, right? You can't possibly be in every church at every moment seeing what happens, and not just churches, every nonprofit.
Right.
These things only come out if somebody reports them, and the members of the organization often don't have any compelling reason to rat out the organization. So, I think there's probably a